Cressman podcast.
With me on the podcast today, my good friend Dayna Bourgoin. Got the pronunciation right, I believe.
We got it. Hi, Jim.
Right. Dayna, it's funny. Full disclosure, you and I have been chatting about doing this podcast for a while, and you've been a little bit concerned about speaking publicly about your accomplishments and all of the great things you've done in this business. It's not like this business generally draws people into it who know on some level they're not going to receive some attention. But yet there's a lot of people like you in this business who have a hard time discussing and disclosing all of the things they've done and all of the achievements they've made. Why do you think that is?
I hate any kind of spotlight. I don't know why I got into radio. Most people do it to be on the air. I did it for the music. But speaking publicly or being in front of people publicly, I can speak one-on-one with you, which is, I'm going to just pretend that's what we're doing, that nobody else is listening right now. But I just feel sick about it. If we talk about my background, is I originally wanted to be a musician. But I, again, have this sick feeling, and I never went away. I think you have to be a special person to want that attention, and I can't do it.
Want that attention and to know what to do with it once you have it.
Yeah. One time I tried to get on the board for CCMA and did the whole big speech in front of the AGM. And I felt like a bleeping idiot. Like, it's just, I was prepared. I knew what I was going to say. I do have a kind of a unique background and felt like I would be an asset, but getting up there, like even right now, my voice is shaking. I just feel so silly speaking on a public platform. So I didn't get on, but it was an experience and people were nice to me, that I did a good job. But yeah, it's just hard for me for whatever reason.
That whole speech process to get on the CCMA board is a dog and pony show in itself, man. Like, it's funny. When I first started attending the annual general meetings at the CCMAs, the board was stacked with radio people because they were all the best speakers and they could deliver the best speeches. And there were lots of industry people who were more introverted, who just didn't feel very comfortable, and they would come off very awkwardly up there. And then, unfortunately, they wouldn't make it onto the board, even though they might have actually had really good ideas and really great assets to offer the organization. It's a bit of a strange thing because you're right. If you're not necessarily comfortable or attuned to speaking publicly, it's a big barrier.
Yeah, for sure. And I can speak to a group of my colleagues about the stuff we'll talk about today, and I have no issue. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I think I'm a pretty smart woman. But yeah, and sometimes we'll be on a big call with big high ups and I start to feel this sick feeling again. So I think I just have to do it more and I'll get over it. Tracy Martin said that to me before. She's like, just keep doing it and you'll be all right.
Yeah, that's great advice, and it's true. And I think it's good to just, push yourself out of your comfort zone every now and then. That's how you turn an introverted personality into more of an extroverted personality. And I'm really excited to have you on and glad you agreed to do this. So thanks again for overcoming that internal barrier and getting on here. So you do have a very unique background. Like, you and I have known each other for years. You were working for 604, I believe, when we first met, 604 Records out of Vancouver under Jonathan Simkin. But you've been in the management space, the label space, the radio space. Tell us a little bit about your origin story.
Sure. I grew up with music in the house. My dad was in a blues band. And I didn't listen to country music as a kid, or not really until later in my teenage years. I was, it was Muddy Waters and B.B. King for my dad, and my mom was Eagles and Steve Miller Band, which I guess could be a little country at times. But Michael Jackson, it was just not in my house. And in high school, I was listening to Nirvana and Green Day and Pearl Jam. It was not country.
All the good stuff.
Yeah, it was not country until my older cousin started talking about Garth Brooks. I was like, what is this? It didn't come across. It is, and which makes me, now that I'm this far in the industry, going, there's still people out there that actually do not even know what country music is, believe it or not. That's what I think. So I didn't know until I heard it, and then I was obsessed. And then it was Shania and Faith Hill and Brooks and Dunn, and I could not get enough of country.
Do you remember what song from Garth is the one that got you hooked, or what album?
I think Ain't Going Down, and seeing that video, him, it was the live performance, was unreal. It was a rock show. It was just so cool. That would have been it for me. So yeah, I
And so
just
that sort of was the gateway drug for you, for
yeah,
lack of a better phrase,
yeah,
right? To get you into
totally.
country music,
Yeah,
and then you fell in love with the format, and you figured, if I can just figure out a way to be close to this professionally, I'm going to be happy
that's right.
for
Yeah,
most of my life. Well,
yeah,
good on you for
yeah.
identifying that and figuring that out. How old were you at the time?
Um, I think I was about 17. And also when I was 17, I was still actually playing music, which is ridiculous that I couldn't do that now. I don't know
What'd you
how I did it.
play?
I was playing guitar and singing with my cousin. We were just like writing songs, and it was like kind of folky, kind of just songwriter stuff. Not very good. I mean, we were 16, 17, writing and playing in kind of bars and stuff. Um, but I always felt sick doing it. I always felt sick doing it. And she was incredible, and she still does music, and she's anyway. Long story about her, but I
But
realized
you felt sick doing it because when you would get in front of an audience, but I'm sure you were comfortable when it was just you and her.
for sure. Yeah,
Right.
I love music. I knew I needed to be around it. I couldn't do it myself, and also not only did I have a sick feeling, I wasn't actually that good at it. Like, I wasn't, I wasn't an amazing singer. I don't think I'd hurt your ears, but I wasn't crazy good. Um, so then I found radio. I realized that radio could be the way in for me to be in the music side of things. So I took radio broadcasting at Algonquin College in Ottawa. The other little part of my story, I like to say it's a bit crass, but got knocked up in college. Um,
It's
got
not
pregnant.
crass. It happens. And what a blessing you have because of it,
Yeah, it
you
kind of
know?
worked out. But at the time, I had people saying, drop out of school or give her up, or there's just all, the amount of people that's tried to force me to quit school was crazy. It was like that to me was the most ridiculous thing I could do. I'm trying to give this baby a life, and I need to make something of myself. So that really pushed me.
Yeah,
Um,
if nothing else, now you have something even more powerful to motivate you.
yeah, yeah. So it was an interesting time for school because pregnant the first year, had her in June, went back in September to school, and I was going home in between classes to breastfeed. It was a wild time.
I'll bet you
Um,
weren't partying that much.
I wasn't, and I never really did that. Well, until I got to CMT, then I people have stories. But anyway, sorry, this is so long. It shouldn't be this long. So I got into radio pretty easily because there was a bursary that Rogers was offering to work at the country station, and there I was one out of two people in my class that applied because people did not want to work at the country station, and like for me that was my dream. So I won this thing, which was basically a summer job in promo, and I stayed. Like they realized they couldn't get rid of me, so I stayed in promo, doing like concerts and contesting and all the stuff
Handing out stickers
all that
and
stuff.
setting, did
Yep,
you set up remotes and all that sort of thing
all of
too?
that stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
a
that's
lot
the
of fun.
entry level. Did you ever get dressed up in a mascot outfit?
They didn't. They didn't make me do that.
They
I
didn't make
could
you
have.
do that.
No,
Okay.
they didn't. I might have been able to hiding my face to do something public like that. But yeah. Anyway,
It's funny
at
when I worked promo for Country 105 years ago, I just want to regale you with this quick story. Everybody would come up to me and go, "How do I get this job?" And I go like, "You can fucking have my job." Like
yeah,
there were times where it just didn't feel very glorious, and I did enjoy it in the macro overall. But there were days where in those days they had you dress up as the cash cow and get this big, heavy, sweaty uh, mascot uniform to put on, or outfit, I guess you'd call it, and it was just not as cool and glorious as you sort of
no,
pictured that it might be.
no.
But like with you, it leads to better things.
Yeah.
So please continue.
The pay was shit, and I was a single mother. So I knew I had to do something else. And all this time in promo, I was actually sitting with the music director whenever I could. I'd say, please, can I come to your meetings? Can you show me how it was Selector at the time? How does this work? And she would help me. Like I would sit there in my lunch hour or sit there after work, and she would show me or let me in on that, which was really nice of her. She was actually a big mentor of mine. But I was making no money in promo, and there was a sales job. I was like, I can
So
do
there's a
that.
great lesson in that, what you just disclosed there, and that if you want something, you have to initiate, you have to
Yeah.
show interest, you have
Yeah.
to ask people who might be in a position to mentor you to take that time and do that.
Yeah.
But you have to be assertive enough to do that. So good on you.
Yeah, yeah. So I there was a sales job that opened up. It was paid a lot more money. So I tried that for 6 months. I hated it. The sales is hard. It's a hard gig no matter what you're selling, but selling country radio in Ottawa was really, really hard. Um, and then this woman decided to leave. She got married and moved to England, and so this job opened up, and I got that gig 6 months later. I was the music director at CKBY, which was unreal to me. And also the pay was less, but I didn't care. I was doing something I wanted to do. So I went back down in salary. I didn't give a shit. I was like, "Yep, this is what I'm supposed to be doing." So around the time I got that job, the CMT job was posted. They were looking for a music director, and I thought, "Well, I just got this job. I'm not going to even think about it." But that got into my brain of like, "No, CMT is where I should be. CMT is my dream job." So I worked
Right,
away.
because of the was it the video element that really was so interesting to you, or was it the brand of CMT itself being international and national?
All of it was just like, God, if I could work there, I'm at the top. This was like, what I really, really wanted to do. Um, so that summer, I actually bought tickets to see the Dixie Chicks, which were my favorite of all time. Now the Chicks, and went out of my way to ask Casey Clark, who was the program director at the time, for a tour. I wanted to meet him, say hello, and get a tour of CMT, and he graciously did. And that is what eventually got me that gig there. Like when I applied for this job, because it came up again for some reason, 9 months later, that job came available again. And I applied for it. Casey knew me because I, again, went out of my way to meet this guy. And I got the gig. I was 25 years old and I was the music director at CMT, which was like, it was just
So it's
crazy.
interesting. It's very interesting that you have that dynamic to your personality because you talk about being an introvert and being very shy, but
Mhm.
you've just given me two really great examples of summoning the courage to go out of your comfort zone and ask things of people that, certainly could have felt like you could potentially face down rejection,
Mhm.
right? There
Yeah.
must have been a part of you that was concerned with that. How did you overcome that at the time and make those big asks?
It's funny because I'm confident. Like I'm shy and reserved, and it takes a bit to get to know me, but I'm actually quite confident, and I feel like I exude that when I meet somebody one on one. And I don't know, I was a fan. I just I just, I believe in taking risks, put yourself out there. So I don't know. You're right. It's kind of, it seems like an oxymoron that I'm that shy and quiet. That I could do that, but I did, and I got the gig,
No,
and
listen, it's a healthy dichotomy,
yeah,
and you did it,
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's great. So you end up at CMT, and what year is this?
This is 2003. I had also had, back to me being in college and people saying, no, you should quit. I had the same thing. You're going to move to Toronto with a 5 year old. Um, but I had people say, no, you're crazy. You can't move to this big city without any support, friends or family, whatever. So people telling me no didn't really help their cause, but it certainly pushed me to go watch me. Um, so yeah, I worked there for almost 6 years, and eventually Casey moved on to move out west, and Ted Ellis was my boss, and both of them were very great. I learned a lot from both of them, um, and yeah, I loved that job. Um,
Yeah, I did work at CMT for a little while. I did some promo work there, and Casey worked there at the same time. I was there a little earlier than when Ted came in, but yeah, great culture, and most of the people who were there had followed their passion into the business, which I really admire, and I think
yeah,
that gives you somewhat of a superpower almost. Like
yeah,
if you're in the business because it helps you make ends meet, well, that's one thing, right? There's some practicality to that. But if you're in the business because you love it, you want to meet and interact with the artists and get behind artists that you really believe in and exemplify their product. I mean, that's a whole other level of excitement and commitment. And
yeah.
obviously, you've had that. So, how did you navigate over to the label and management world from there?
I I realize that I'm the type of person that needs change and growth, and after 5 or 6 years at a place, and this keeps happening to me, I feel like I need to do something else. So I felt that there. I felt kind of restless after a while, and I wasn't growing anymore. And I think I also looked ahead and saw that CMT was changing. So that was part of it. The other part of it is I wanted to go home. Ottawa is home for me. All of my family's there. My brother and sister were, getting married, having babies, and I felt like I should be there. I was missing out on that side of my life. So I literally quit with nothing, Jim. Like I had an idea in my head that I wanted to do, radio tracking and publicity. I didn't really know how I was going to do it. I kind of talked to different people in the industry. I talked to Paul Brandt, and Paul said, "I'll be your first client." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, for sure." So I started telling people that Paul was actually never my client, but it was something he said, and I believed him. So I told a few people, "Holy shit, Paul Brandt, you're working for Paul Brandt." Never happened. Hilarious. But I worked with a few people, really interesting things. Like I worked with Willie Mack for a minute. I worked with Whisper, and Bill Anderson helped him on a publicity tour across Canada. I did some really interesting things, and eventually I started working for Jonathan Simkin with Jessie Farrell, who was the CCMA Female Artist of the Year, and just
Yeah.
working kind of her secondary radio because they had Universal helping, and I worked, some publicity. So I started doing that.
Did you
And
enjoy the process of tracking records and making those phone
I
calls?
did not know. It was really hard. And like I
Well,
had,
it's a lot like sales, which is why I
yes,
asked, because
yeah, it
you
was,
mentioned
yeah,
earlier you didn't like sales. I'm like,
yeah.
well, tracking is
Yeah,
essentially
yeah.
sales.
I have so much respect for Annie Wilson and Rob Chuby and all these guys that do that job because it was a tough go, and I had some decent artists. I well, so I went kind of from a contract work for Jonathan, and eventually Jonathan brought me on full time to kind of focus on country. And to fill in for someone who had gone on mat leave. So I did get to work. I worked Mariana's Trench a little bit. I got to work Faber Drive. I got to work Carly Rae Jepsen. But also I got to launch Dallas Smith. I got to launch Small Town Pistols. Like I did some cool shit there and that I'm so proud of. And it was just such a neat experience to watch that happen and to grow it. Um, so yeah, I loved my time there. And I worked from home in Ottawa. So Jonathan just let me work from home, and it was just the best of both worlds. I was in this new part of the industry, learning, kind of bullshitting my way through some of it, but like learning as I went. And I love that gig. I love that gig. I got to sign a couple artists. Um,
What
yeah,
was the criteria for you when you were signing artists that really would make you want to make that commitment?
just a crazy belief, like a gut. I mean, they had to come with songs and sort of a package in the first place. Also, I can admit that none of the things I brought forward actually worked. So that happened more than it didn't. It's like, same, Jonathan had some other country signings that did not work. And like you're sitting there going, why? And it's funny, like being out of it, I kind of realized what went on. Like my example is, there's lots of people that bring things to me now that I'm back in radio that you guys believe in on 100%. But you're so inside of it. Like it's hard to be subjective, and like when I was working for Jonathan, I kind of stopped, you kind of stop really paying that much attention to radio it's on. You kind of know like what's going on and stuff, but if you're not listening every day, it's just different. And I felt like that for Small Town Pistols. I'd like, these guys are so good. Like the Wilkinson's History, like that record, both records in my mind, I could not understand why they a couple of songs went, like Living on the Outside did really well, and a couple of the songs did okay. But to me, they should have been superstars. I think they were ahead of the time, ahead of the curve, whatever you want to say, because I think if that music came out now, maybe they would be super successful. But I'm inside, I believe in these guys. There's no reason why they shouldn't be top 10 singles every time. And they weren't. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to me, yeah, to be on the other side of it, to be in radio going, like, I know how you guys feel because I've done that. I've been there. I believe in these artists and they believe in themselves. And we have this whole, marketing machine behind it. Like it should be working. Why isn't it working? And sometimes you just don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Like you and I have had these conversations about clients that we currently work with, clients in the past, and I understand that radio is essentially in the business of relevance, right? They have to be relevant to a demographic that they are in charge of selling space and advertising time to. And And it's tough to roll the dice on new artists or maybe some artists who are somewhat past their prime and don't identify with the demographic anymore. Like we've, had this conversation about George Canyon, who has a great new single out, right? And it's contemporary and it's hot and it's streaming off the chart for him compared to anything else we've done. But George's brand is not exactly brand new, right? He's
Yeah.
been around for the better part of 2 decades at Canadian country radio. And so it's tough to make that case. Who do you think is doing an amazing job? I mean, you mentioned two names, Rob Chuby and Annie Wilson, obviously. Who do you think is doing an amazing job in the tracker space in Canada right now?
Um, those are kind of the two go-tos. Adrian Locke's really good. I don't. Honestly, it's hard for me to think off the top of my head. There's kind of lots of like little indies. There aren't that many anymore. I feel like there used to be way more. But the ones that are good are someone like Anya Wilson who has the relationships. And you're like, I listen to her podcast that you did with her, and she's fantastic. And she's everything she's doing is right. And the fact that she's still relevant into her 70s is crazy. Like,
Her work ethic is nuts.
yeah,
I've been just helping her a little bit on tracking this Canyon single, and she has a list of shit for me to do every day,
yeah,
and she's matching it or doing more. And it's like,
yeah,
I don't know how you get to all this. It's just so
yeah,
impressive. And the other thing about Anya is she's old school,
yeah,
and that's a compliment, right? Like
yeah,
she will not just send an email and wait. She will get people on the phone. She will get them committed.
yeah,
She'll talk them into it. She
yeah,
really understands how important it is to build relationships in this
yeah,
business, and she's done such a great job of it.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, after 604, and like Jonathan Sipkin is a whole other character, but loved working for him, learned a lot from him. I got a call from David Corey, at the time was in charge of Bell Radio, and he asked me if I'd ever thought about going back to radio. I said no, because I just loved what I was doing so much. But he said, "Well, what if it's country? What if it's Ottawa?" I was like, "Okay, you have my attention." So offered me the gig, and it was so fun to launch a new country station in Ottawa. Was so fun, and just loved it. Like those first couple of years with that station was just unreal.
But they had a fairly established country station in that market, so there must have been some challenges too.
There were, I mean, they were there for 40 years or something like that, and that was the station I started at. So it felt weird suddenly being a competitor. Um,
Right.
yeah, but it actually wasn't long before we, outpaced them in ratings, and yeah, I was just really, really proud of the work we did.
You alluded to the myopic nature of people in artist development, but I think people need to understand that there's a whole crazy ass myopic world in radio.
For
Like
sure.
there's like a team mentality, and there's like like there's some real rifts between radio stations in some markets, and
Hmm.
when they trade staff back and forth, or who gets a premiere, or who gets a presents on a show. Like a lot of people listening probably have no idea of the politics behind radio and
Yeah,
how it all works and how
yeah,
fierce the competition is.
yeah.
And now that we have some streaming services sort of entering the foray too, I mean that's added another dynamic. It's like, do you want Spotify to present your national Canadian tour, knowing full well that you're going to also have to partner with radio stations in each market? And then how
Hmm.
do you think those conversations are going to go with
Right.
Spotify attached?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's
yeah,
gonna get tricky.
it
Yeah,
is, it
and
is.
I was on the other. I was on the side of my bosses were going. We don't understand, why aren't they giving us the show exclusively? Like Luke Bryan comes to town. Why isn't it ours? We have better ratings. And like I understand on the artist side why it's beneficial to have both stations. So it was sort of about constantly having that conversation of it doesn't actually matter that we have better ratings, and it doesn't actually matter that we're spending more money on these shows. We would spend so much money on concert tickets, which I was very proud of. We'd spend money on bringing shows to town and spend money on concert tickets that a lot of the radio stations couldn't do.
Yeah,
Um,
was that part of the obligation that you guys had in your license, or
it
was
was
that just
not.
something
No.
innovative that you came up with?
Yep, we did not have that in our
So just
license.
just
Yeah.
so people understand, Dayna literally would call me, book an artist, do a win to get in or buy all the tickets for the show and then give them away on a radio station. And I remember like being like, why are you doing this? And you were
Yeah.
like, well, we want to reinvest in the marketplace and build goodwill.
Yeah.
And then it made it very easy to give you guys an exclusive because you're
Yeah.
literally paying for the show and buying all the tickets. It's
Yeah.
like, well,
Yeah.
fair enough.
That's how eventually we did it. And that's, we knew we had to beat the competition. And that's how we were doing it. We were just like, we own most a lot of the country shows coming through town. So
Was that
uh,
your idea?
I had a lot to do with it, but Richard Gray is the VP in Ottawa, and he really believed in building this country station in Ottawa. And he's the one with the cash. He'd say, "Go find me some gigs. Go find me some artists that will do this show." So I'm going to actually give most of that credit to Richard because, yeah, I'd never seen it before. Back in the day when I first started in radio in the late '90s, promoters would give us a crap ton of tickets. Well, that kind of ended. Like you have to do a
Mhm.
lot to get free tickets out of promoters these days. But
Well, it's
yeah,
because aspects of the business model from the artist side just flipped on their head. I mean, when I
yeah,
got into the business in the late 90s, early 2000s, people were touring in support of records. And what was driving all the revenue was record sales, right? So it was like you only went on tour to sell records. And when you went on tour, you could price your tickets cheap because you were just trying to drive people to consume that record. And you could give away a ton of tickets because the artist guarantees hadn't gotten as insane, proportionately speaking, as they are now, right?
yeah,
There were a lot of artists willing to work for a lot less back then because it wasn't an imperative revenue stream. Of course, when uh, you know ripping, burning CDs, streaming services, Napster, all of that came along, then it just flipped the model on its head, and artists needed to start making that money up through what they were charging for their guarantees for live shows because they knew they weren't going to make any money off their records anymore. And that it's just so interesting to me. It's like that business just flipped. It went from tour to sell the record to put out the record and invest in that in order to drive the demand for touring.
yeah, yeah. It totally changed over time. Yeah,
So while that's all going on, you end up back in radio and then talk a little bit about the ascension from there. And by the way, don't feel bad about this going on. This is fun. This is all
yeah.
good to talk about.
Okay. um, yeah, I think, like, after a few years of New Country 94, we started talking about a national brand and what that would look like. I think it's funny, really early on at New Country, I started to think, and so again, so did my boss Richard, about what's the best way for us to share content. We own all these radio stations across the country. Yeah, they all have different brands, but so one way was putting our countdown across all the stations. That way, if we got an interview with Dallas Smith or Keith Urban or whatever, then all of the stations could use that content. So we were like, I feel like I went back into my phone notes in 2015. I just started working at the station in 2014, but I have notes in my phone from 2015 that kind of almost describe the job I'm doing now. I don't know why I did it. I think I was trying
Was
to.
it sort of like a vision board?
It
Like this is
was.
what I
Yeah, it was me having lots of conversations with my boss about what this could look like if we were all one brand, and like what my job could be. And it was what I'm doing now. It's just, yeah, I guess I somewhat manifested it, but it was sort of an idea that I constantly push forward is what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? Also behind the scenes, there was corporate stuff going on where they all saw that too. Like it wasn't just like, hey, this is my idea to make all this beer country, but it was something that I constantly thought about is what's the best way for us to basically, yeah, share content and
and you have more marketplace power too
yeah,
because you've got 16 radio stations, they're all pulling in the same direction. You can make more deals with artists, with national brands, with sponsorships. um, and I would imagine, although I don't know, which is why I'm going to ask you, some of that may have come from your experience at CMT, which was a national brand out of the gate.
yeah, yeah, for sure. A lot of it was that. I like it was just so in my head to um yeah, amalgamate these radio stations. And it worked out perfectly because radio started hurting and they needed to find a way to save money. So it was sort of best of both worlds, in my opinion, that this all happened. The flip to pure country, I also got to be heavily involved with. Being in meetings about like what are we about and what does this brand look like and what does the logo look like. Like, it was just so many interesting conversations that I didn't really get to do. I've never got to do before. And then, yeah, we got to launch Pure Country, and it kind of went from there. How I moved from the program director in Ottawa to what I'm doing now, which is the national music director for the Pure Country brand. I think I kind of forced my way through. I was just on all those phone calls about national stuff when we were doing stuff with, iHeart Country in the US. I was involved in those conversations when we were doing, national interviews, when Shannon Ella needed some support at CRS or whatever. It was sort of, I honestly just pushed my way through what happened. So eventually they said, "Hey, do you want to do this gig? Can you come to Toronto and do this gig?" I'm like, "Yep." Kind of easy decision. My daughter is here. So it was sort of an easy decision this time, considering I left here over 10 years ago. Here I am back full circle. It's kind of funny, but I think it makes more sense now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, watching your career trajectory is compelling, but the business as well has adapted and shifted so much from the first time that you were in it to where it is now. It just seems like radio is on this journey of conglomeration, acquisition, more and more and more, more syndication and simulcasting. What do you think the future of FM radio in country music is? And a lot of people have talked about radio disappearing or going away. There seems to be no indication of that. But it's always interesting to get the perspective of someone who's actually in the business, dealing with the adversities and challenges right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I remember when Sirius XM first started, I thought those are the conversations going, what are we going to do? And that was years, I was over 10 years
20
ago.
years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so far, none of this stuff I don't think has hurt us. I mean, have our numbers depleted a little bit? Maybe, but like there's so much attention going all over the place. Like, it's not just streaming, it's not just those other platforms, but it's everywhere, right? Like, it's
Social
TikTok,
media.
it's all of those things. I really believe in radio, and I think there's a place for it. There will be, just because people are coming to radio for the stuff that they always did, which was like local news and weather and traffic and stuff like that, which I know you can find on apps nowadays, but there's still just something about getting in your car in the morning, going to work, turning on the radio. And, you can hear your favorite music anywhere, but radio still has the personality. So all of these morning shows will continue to be important. They're driving to local community events and things going on. And you just like them. Like, you get to know them. They feel like friends to you. Like, those are the best radio stations to me. When you turn them on, you feel like you're listening to your friends having a conversation. And then as far as syndication goes, I mean, yeah, it's just the way the business is going. But I think for us to have someone like Shannon Ella, who's a very strong personality, is like a super fan of the format, only benefits us in every way. And we're getting huge interviews that, again, we're sharing across the platforms and turning into, using that content all over the place on socials and on radio and everywhere else. So yeah, I think we're still in a good place. Is that going to change? I mean, everything's going to change. It's just a matter of when and how. But
Yeah, and country music seems to be a bit sheltered from some of the changes that have happened in other formats, in that country music radio is still imperative. It's still a driver for festivals, fairs, for buyers to consider who they're going to hire and bring in for their events. We're seeing in pop music and hip hop, a lot of people breaking on TikTok. There have been a few examples of those stories, Robin Ottolini probably being the latest,
yeah,
with F-150. But by and large, most of the artists that are breaking through and getting the attention are doing it on radio. Why do you think that's happening in country music and it's dissipating across rock, hip hop, and pop?
Hmm. I don't really know why it's staying stronger in country other than our audience is maybe a bit older. I don't really know. I mean, like
Is there a loyalty
there's
factor?
for sure loyalty. Yeah, like when you're a country fan, you're a country fan for life, and people listening to our radio stations, they're listening to us all day long. Like that's they have it in the background at work, they have it on at home. It's just I don't know. It's just part of their lives. It's just I don't know. I can't really explain why, but for our group of stations, we are heavily leaning current, so I feel really good about the stuff we're introducing to
Mhm.
our listeners, and they know that they're going to hear the new Thomas Rhett song on our radio stations. And could they go find it themselves? Of course they could, but it's neat to have it in the mix and to have it mixed with our personalities and everything else that goes on with radio. So yeah,
I think
it's
too,
really good.
like the myopic factor is a big one, right? Because for people who essentially use radio to a degree as background noise, or they tune in maybe as they're driving into work, they enjoy curated content. The problem with some of the streaming services is that you'll turn on a playlist and you go, I don't know any of these artists.
Yeah,
Like I haven't heard any of these songs. There's no familiarity. Where with radio, generally, if you guys decide to roll the dice on, Thomas Rhett 2013, here you are 8 years later, you are investing in these artists
yeah,
for the long term, at least while they retain their relevance,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And for the consumer, I think there's a benefit in that going, yeah, I don't have to be like searching on YouTube to figure out who I'm going to listen to, even though, some people really enjoy that. But a lot of people, it's like, I want someone to do that for me. And that is one of the things that concerns me about the future, if especially if radio becomes less and less popular, is that it's a very effective curating mechanism to separate the wheat from the chaff in our
yeah,
business.
yeah,
And
for sure.
we shouldn't just in a cavalier sense let that go away. I
Hmm.
mean, the Spotify's and you know Amazon Music. I mean, they're also curating those playlists, no doubt about it. They're putting lots of work into it, but it's not to the same level as a trusted brand affiliation like you guys have, and
Yeah,
that relationship with your listeners that you guys have had for multiple years, where people know if they tune in, they're going to get a certain quality product.
yeah, yeah, and we're building relationships for the artists and the listeners too, which I think is harder to do on streaming platforms maybe, but we're bringing these artists to you, we're bringing you interviews, we're bringing you, performances, we're bringing concerts, maybe we're not technically bringing the concerts, but it sure feels like we are, Pure Country presents Brett Kissel at the Cart Fair. Um, it definitely makes people, um, yeah, want to feel connected, I think.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. So do you think, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I kind of have to because it's an interview. Do you think you'll ever shift back into management or into the artist development side of the business? Like you mentioned earlier that it's really important for you to continue to grow.
Hmm.
And you've obviously ascended rapidly in pure country. At some point, though, do you go, and maybe it's a decade or more from now where you're like, no, I really want to work with artists and I want to develop some projects again. Do you ever see that in your future?
I for sure do. Yeah. Like I think I said before, I feel like I get kind of restless after a certain amount of time. And I feel like this opportunity, well, I've been at Bell for, 6 or 7 years, which is a pretty long time for me. So I bounced around. This feels like a brand new start and I could hang on to this for, another 5 to 10 years, like you said. But I look at what Tracy Martin's doing now, and it's just like, God, I look up to that woman so much. But I met Tracy at CMT, like
Yeah,
we worked
she's a
together then,
beast.
and like it's crazy what she's done. So yeah, I definitely in my future, see something like that.
Have you ever heard of the 6 human psychological needs for evaluations?
I don't
You
know.
ever heard of that? Because it's funny, you've actually mentioned a couple of them,
Okay.
so I just thought, it'd be kinda interesting to run through them, but the first one is significance. All of us, even the most, um, introverted of us need to feel like we matter to some
Hmm.
degree in the world, right? If
Hmm.
we don't feel like we matter in our relationship, in our job, at some point, we're gonna just become dispossessed, right? The second one is certainty. We all require a little bit of certainty. Regular paycheck, that's a nice thing, right? Like
Hmm.
if you're working for yourself, you're kind of forfeiting the certainty to a degree. The third thing, conversely, is variety. So you need some changes, you need some challenges. Those are imperative. The fourth thing is love and connection. So you have to feel like you are connected to what you do and who you're around, and they have to matter to you, and you have to matter to them. Fifth thing, which you've mentioned now 3 times, is growth.
Mm.
And the way this was explained to me is the individual who explained it to me said, "Have you ever heard of that CEO who's been at the top of a company and at the top of their game and the top of their industry for 10 or 15 years, and suddenly they just resign?" And I'm like, "Oh
Mm.
yeah, that happens all the time." It's
Right.
it's because they stop growing.
Yeah.
And if we're not growing, it's a natural law. We're dying to some
Yeah.
degree, right?
Yeah.
And then the final thing, number six, is contribution to the greater good.
Mm.
And that goes back to our tribal psychology and feeling that we need to be doing something that not just benefits us, but benefits our family, our community, and the greater community, right? So it's interesting. I often pull those back up and use them as I'm evaluating decisions I want to make, personal or professional,
Mhm.
because it's like, will this check these boxes and to what degree, right? From a scale of 1 to 5. And then as you go through that, it just sort of helps you make those decisions where you feel like you're just on the fence and you've got no help,
Yeah,
you
cool, I
know?
really like that. Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. So I wondered if you'd heard of them, because I'm like, she
that's funny.
she is you're integrating those things in your professional choices in your life.
Yeah, 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 maybe not consciously, but for sure. Those are the things I think about. Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. And
Mm.
interestingly enough, your daughter has been bitten by the artistic bug too,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
She's doing some acting.
Yep, she decided to go into theater, which made me a bit nervous going, "Oh, you may as well be a musician." Like, it's so hard to break through. I know how hard it is to break through, but she believe she's amazing, first of all, and I've seen her act all through high school and everything, and she just got it. So, yep, go ahead, follow your dreams. And she's shot a movie last year. Actually, today we found out she's going to be on an episode of Transplant, which is a huge CTV show that airs on NBC in the States. That's shooting at the end of May. Anyway, just it's so fun to watch what she's doing. I'm oh god, it's so proud. It hurts. It's so fun.
Well, where do you think she learned it?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. I mean, you know
Like
what? I can say like that's the one thing I said this since I was in my 20s, but I'm not actually that humble about. I'm a great mother.
yeah,
So
you're a great mom, but you've also set a great example professionally for her, right? To go, no, you have to follow your heart and you have to do things that feel like they matter to you, and you have to feel like you're making a difference, and you have to pursue your passion. And you know, I always joke around about this with my wife. I say, like, kids don't do what you say, they do what you do.
yeah,
So if you're listless and restless and dispassionate about your career, they're going to see that and go, well, that's what a work life is like. You
hmm,
know, mom or dad is upset every night and they don't really enjoy what they do and they don't care. And that's what a profession is, right? But if you can have the gumption to do what you've done, which is jump from different industries, work for yourself, back into massive companies, all in pursuit of passion, then what you've done is you've laid out that template, that blueprint for your children to look at, consider, and follow.
yeah,
Right. So it's pretty cool to see it. It must feel extra rewarding knowing that she probably had the courage to pursue this, not only because she had your support, but because she had your example.
yeah, yeah. I hope that's true.
I'm sure it is to some degree.
Yeah.
So, you talked about maybe getting back into artist management at some point, or working with artists directly again. What are the things you really miss about working with artists directly? Is it the psychology of them? Is it the development process? Is it getting other people bought into the concept and the brand and the idea of what they are? Like, what is it that you really miss?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it's different for every artist. Working with Dallas was interesting because he was a huge success before, and getting him to break in the country. Like if you look at Dallas now, number one after number one, like he's had 11 in a row or something like that. It wasn't like that in the beginning. It was a push. It was trying to figure out how to break through. And he wasn't getting, number ones back then.
Well, I think the country music community can be a bit clicky. And I think
Yeah.
that when Darius Rucker, left Hootie and put out a country record and people did welcome him, you started to see this trend of rock musicians who were maybe not as relevant within their format as they once were, now moving over or migrating over to country music. And I do think that our industry is a little clicky at times, and I think that sometimes rubbed people the wrong way. Did you experience some of that with Dallas in the beginning?
I think so. God, and people still ask Dallas about default. He just is like, we're still talking about default? They've been doing country music for like 12 years or something like that. Yeah, there was a little bit of that, but for me, it was watching how hard he worked and how hard his management team worked. And they got into every crook and corner to make this guy, the success that he is today. So I just absorbed everything I could. So that was kind of a different thing because he knew what it was like to be in the music business. And then there was newer artists that you don't even know anymore. The development stage and finding songs. Really, actually, the songs was always the best part for me, and it still is today. Like even in radio, for Small Town Pistols, the Wilkinsons were sending dozens of songs. What do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? Like that. That was really fun to kind of A&R that a little bit. Yeah, and like working with 604 was cool because Jonathan was very open to the artists, which some labels are not. Jonathan really let them control a lot. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, he is infamous for that.
Yeah,
He does buy into great artists,
yeah,
endorse great artists, and let them do their thing.
yeah,
Even if they want
yeah,
to take some risks, he's always
yeah,
on board with that.
yeah. Definitely interesting to work with some of the personalities, which also helped me in this job in radio, working with talent. I mean, it felt like the same thing. So learning what I learned translated into radio as well. So yeah,
One thing we hear a lot about these days is the importance of incentivizing more women to get into music, whether it's on the artist side or the industry side. Um, are there additional barriers for women to get into the industry today? Or do you feel like the atmosphere and environment has shifted to a point where it's much more equitable? Like, I
yeah,
mean, you've been in this business for 20 years, so
yeah.
you'd have a front row seat to that issue.
For sure. I was saying this to Madison earlier that I remember sitting on a bus, one of those little bus tours during CRS when I was just starting at CMT, and there was all dudes around me. There was not very many females, not very I didn't know any female program directors. There was a few handful of music directors in radio, but it was very male dominated. And yeah, I don't feel that anymore. I'm in a group, working when I worked in Ottawa, more than half the leadership were female. I'm finally this is the first time in my life I'm actually working for a female boss. Sarah Cummings is my boss, and she's lovely and smart. And it's just it's actually a different feeling to work for a woman that I'm really enjoying. I like, all my other previous bosses were
How's it
wonderful.
different?
I can't really describe it honestly. It just feels like I honestly don't know why it's different. It just feels different. It feels like we're on a different level. We're in it together. I don't know. It just feels different. I can't really articulate why, unfortunately. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
it's
that's
yeah,
okay. I don't
yeah,
want to put you on the spot, but that's interesting that you say that, and it's funny. You and I have been in the business for to a degree the same amount of time. Like I started in the late '90s, early 2000s, and I feel the same way. I've seen this migration of the demographic shift in our business, which I think is is positive. It's great, right? Like it
Mhm.
should be equal opportunity. Um, but it's more, it's talked about more than it ever was, even though the problem seems to be less than it ever was. It's like nobody was
Yeah.
talking about how many women weren't in the business in the late 90s,
Yeah.
but now it's shifting, and so I've it's nice to hear that from you, because I've kind of been of the mindset where I'm like, hey, I've been in this business for 20 years. The landscape is changing. If we don't mess with it too much and we just
Yeah.
allow the cream to rise to the top, you're
Yeah.
going to end up with a higher proportion of women in this business, right?
For
You don't
sure.
need
Yep.
to force a lot, or you know um, sort of put quantitative hiring practices or quota hiring practices in place necessarily, because it seems to be migrating in the right direction. And hopefully it just continues on that trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I
good
would
to
love
have
to
more
see more.
voices in the room.
I would love to see more female managers and promoters and on that side of it. I feel like it was a little bit slower, but we're getting there.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing is, you know, whether you're a man or a woman, we all have certain psychological proclivities and tendencies. And people who are just generally a little bit more aggressive, more assertive, more willing to ask for things just seem to rise a little bit higher. And those can be women and they can be men. We've all met very
Mhm.
aggressive type A personality men in this business, but we've met women like that too.
Mhm.
And those are the nuances in the conversation that sometimes I feel get lost, where it's not all women are just the same. Not all
Yeah.
men are just the same, right? Like,
Mhm.
you can have completely different personalities in very similar wrapping paper.
Yeah.
And it's important for all of us in the industry, as we work to sort of shift how the demographic looks, to understand that probably in many cases, whether it's a man or a woman, people who have certain personality types are going to rise no matter what.
Yeah.
We just have to
It's
make sure
a,
that the
yeah.
playing field is equal.
It's interesting when you said that maybe some women are less likely to ask for it, go for it. Like I wonder if that is part of it.
I don't know if it's
Um,
women or people. Like,
yeah.
I think, listen,
Yeah.
I'm in sales. I have always struggled with asking on my own behalf. I got no problem fighting like a motherfucker on behalf of my clients, because I love and believe in what they're doing. And I actually really believe, to a point where I seem like a bit of a crazy person, that if you put my artist on your radio station, if you put my artist on your festival, it's going to be the best night. Like I really believe that, because I'm so committed to them. It's the only reason I'll sign anybody. It's like I have to really feel that in my gut, and then I can sell that. But when it comes to my own career, I've always been nervous about rejection or asking
Mm,
for things, or
yeah.
you know, asking for a raise when I was making like $5 an hour in the early days. As a promo guy, I was like, I don't want to ask for a raise. Like
Mhm.
I'm good to work my way up and prove my worth, which I'm not sure if that's the wrong approach either. But it is
Mhm.
interesting, because I do think that, and I did read this a while ago. I think you're bang on the aggressiveness factor in terms of personalities. What is it? 6 out of 10. If you choose 10 random women and 10 random men out of a population, 60% of the time the men will be more aggressive. But
Mhm.
that's not an overwhelming number, because that means
True.
that
Yeah.
40% of the time the women are going to be more aggressive than the other men, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, you wonder when you look at our business sometimes. Like, I often wonder when it comes to female artists proliferating our industry, how we can incentivize more women to take up the challenge of becoming an artist and getting into business. I think it has a lot to do with the 10-year time deployment to achieve a level of making a living in our business. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of women and men start at the age of 20, taking it seriously. By the time they're 30, they're going, the men are usually in a position where they can continue to elongate that effort after 10 years, a lot of women go, yeah, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to
Yeah.
have more stability in my life, or I want to have a family. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But it's important to have these conversations if we're going to try and solve the problem. And they're hard to have right now in our hypersensitive cancel culture world that we live in, because people don't want
Yeah.
to talk about them. And it's like, well, how are we going to solve them? Right? Like, I want to see
Yeah.
more female artists too. What do you
Yeah.
think it is?
I think about this all the time. I talk about it all the time. 90s women were ruling the radio. I say that women were ruling the radio, which they were, like Martina and Shania, you can go on and on. But like
Yeah.
I programmed the 90s show on Pure Country Saturday nights, and I did all kinds of research. As much as those women were huge in the 90s, there weren't that many number ones. Women were not necessarily reaching up. Shania did, obviously, but a lot of women were not were not hitting number one on those charts, which I thought was kind of interesting, considering we all think, oh, the 90s were so full of women. There's still a lot of dudes. And I should go back and do the comparison percentage wise of what it actually looked like. But I have a feeling even in the 90s, there's still more dudes.
Yeah, it was
Um,
never even. It wasn't
yeah,
like if there's 54 number ones in a year, right?
yeah.
It wasn't 20, 26, 27 females.
No, I don't think so. I remember near the end of my CMT days, a manager came up to me and said, "God, it's just really hard to make a woman artist successful." Like I thought, like that was the first time I actually really ever heard that before. And that was like around 2008, something like that. Going, really? It's hard for female artists to be successful. Like that would never even occurred to me before. It never really. We didn't talk about it at CMT. I didn't notice a huge discrepancy. I didn't follow the rule of not playing females back to back. That it just wasn't a concern to me. It didn't feel, and maybe it was. Like again, I should go back and look, but it didn't feel like an issue back then until someone said that to me, going, "Oh God, it's hard to break a female." And then that's all I heard for the next 15 years is female. And is it because people keep saying it over and over again? Is that why? Or is it actually really that difficult to break a female? Like I can't figure it out. And I
We
look
do
at,
create our own issues based on perception at times, right?
yeah, that's what I wonder is that what it is? And I remember being a music director at CMT and some really great, there's a female artist that I really loved. Her name was Julie Roberts. She had a
Yes.
hit breakdown here, but she didn't do that well. Like, and I was like, is
She
it
was on
because,
Universal.
yeah, yeah, I loved her. She spoke to me like, and that's how I feel about lots of female artists. It's like for me, as a woman listening to radio, and I'm in the right demo, like I relate to it. I react to it. Like it speaks to me. A lot of this music, and is it because back then there were so many more guys programming radio, and like they just didn't get it? Like I couldn't really figure out even back then what the problem was, and I honestly can't figure it out now either. Although we do music testing on all of our, on major market radio stations. And I kind of see it. Like I look at a Miranda Lambert and she takes longer to see a good test than a Luke Combs or a Luke Bryan. She eventually does test,
And a lot of the
but
people that you're testing on are females. That's the
yeah,
other
yeah,
added component to this, right?
that's right.
Like
Yeah,
80% of consumer decisions are made by women,
that's right.
and
Yeah,
it's like, well, maybe there is some truth to women supporting women and that movement
yeah.
and how imperative that is, especially as it pertains to country music. I did a little bit of analytical work on this a little over a year ago because I was really interested, and I found out that between Pandora, Apple Music, Spotify, and Amazon, uh, 88% of the music being serviced to those platforms were performed in country music only, were
Hmm.
performed by males, 12% females.
Right.
So to me, I was like, okay, well, that's interesting because there's no gatekeeper there. There's no
Yeah.
one standing there saying you can't upload your song to, these platforms. And and I've had that argument with, I had it, well, not an argument, but I had that discussion with Kurt Bardella, who's well-known guy in Nashville and also does some work in Washington D.C. And he's like, well, it's because white males are programming all the stations, and that's the problem. And I'm like, yeah, but in the case like there's no one standing in the way if you want to upload your song. right?
Hmm.
So the problem I see is that we have not enough female competitors entering this race,
Yeah.
right? And I've used this
Yeah.
analogy before. If you've got a marathon and you have 100 competitors and 90 of them are men and 10 are women, and the top 10 finishers are 9 men and 1 woman, that's not a sexist race. That's just proportionate to the amount of entrants, um, cross-referenced with their sex or their gender. So it's an interesting thing, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
and it
how do
feels
we
like
get more
it's just
women?
as yeah, and I hear labels say, "Well, radio doesn't play them." Radio says, "Well, labels won't sign them." Like we're just going in circles. Like there's got to be a better solution. I think
We
I've
got to
heard
get more analytical and less
yeah,
political. That's what we
yeah,
got to do. We have to really look at this objectively and talk openly and try to figure it out, because what we're doing right now with making it more political and more of a hot button issue, I think to some degree can have pernicious effects, to a degree. Like, I don't want female artists getting signed under the auspices that they're getting signed because they have a vagina. I
right,
want them to get signed and played because they're fucking good and they are world class and they can stack up against anybody. And
yeah,
that is unfortunately something we all know, but it's not exactly popular to say that. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah. I don't know. And like all the music that we get, we never say this is not going to work because it's female. Like it's always it's going to work or not going to work because of the song or because of like it's never there's the reason it's never this isn't going to work because it's female. Like it's just a really crazy idea that people have in their heads that females don't work. But I think you're right. I think it's just they aren't there. There's not enough of them there. And like you said, I actually listened to your podcast with Amanda Kingsland too. She's like 12 of those female artists, they're not all good either necessarily
yeah,
out of a
totally.
hundred, right? Like, so yeah, I don't really know. I guess we just have to keep talking about
And,
it and
and by the
hopefully
way,
it'll
a big cross section of the men aren't good either. And lots of men
yeah,
get signed and fail. Like,
that's
that's the
right.
other
That's
side
right.
of this where I'm like,
Yeah.
man, you know, there are there are a lot of women like Julie Roberts. That's a good example. But there are lots of men who have come and gone who are incredibly talented,
For sure. Yeah.
sublime skills, and they can't get arrested,
Yeah.
or maybe they
Yeah.
can, but they can't get any attention, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's worthy to have these conversations. And I think for me the key is, how do we incentivize more women to get into this business at a ground level, at a development level, and how do we incentivize the stakeholders, whether it's the labels, whether it's radio, to give them some opportunities to develop a product that can stand up and compete with any man. And then, again, this is super unpopular to say, but some industries are just male dominated and some are just female dominated, right? Like, there aren't a lot of male kindergarten teachers. It's just the way it is,
All
you
right.
know. Uh,
I hope that's
women,
not true
women.
about country music, but yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope so too. But at some point, if we keep going in circles, we're going to have
Yeah.
to get to a conclusion, right?
Yeah.
And what is it? Healthcare now. I mean, it used to be a male-dominated field, but now I believe it's 80% women to 20% men. Like,
Mm.
some businesses just are dominated by certain sexes,
Yeah.
and I agree with you. I hope that's not the case with music, but we may
Yeah.
eventually arrive to that conclusion and just have to all be okay with it.
Mm. Interesting.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of female bricklayers, that's for sure.
No, that's true.
They're out there, but that's a male-dominated industry for sure, right?
Yeah.
But I don't hear a lot of people yelling and screaming about equality there, which is, obviously I get why, but I think we've got to figure out how we can do this at the ground level and see if we can incentivize more stakeholders to roll the dice, take a chance on female, develop them to a level where they can be world class, because there are these situations. I mean, the biggest female artist of all time in Canada, or the biggest artist of all time in Canada, is a female, Shania Twain. Like, there are people who do break through and break through not only nationally, but internationally and globally. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, what are they doing right? Let's
Yeah.
learn from that, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, killer songs, killer production, you know,
Yeah,
marketing machine. Yeah.
all of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I cannot believe this. We've already been on for an hour.
Awesome.
Um,
This
it
was
is,
not that painful.
I'm glad to hear that. I was hoping it wouldn't be. No, I really appreciate you coming on and disclosing some things. Before you go, I know there's a lot of artists who listen to this and a lot of emerging artists, and they're always looking for tips and tricks about what they can offer, what type of scenario they can put forth that might make them more compelling to an individual who has as much power and leverage as you do in this business. So, hiring a good tracker. I think that's a good place to start. Having a bit of
Hmm.
buzz and good publicity, right? Some social media numbers. Beyond those obvious things, what else can an artist do that really bolsters and fortifies their case?
The most obvious thing, even besides those obvious things, is the song. I need a song. I need a song. Like, this is actually something that I'm pretty sure Casey Clark drilled into my head. Is the song either has to be relatable, something you react to, or something you sing to. Those are kind of the three things. Do we have one of those three things in this song? Then you have a chance. The song has to be there more than anything else, and that happens all the time. We hear a great song and we want to jump on board and support it. All of those other things, yeah, like we have our iHeartRadio Future Star program. So I see a lot of artists come through there, and the ones that break through, and we had some really cool artists come through that program. That was, Jade Eagleston and Tennille Arts and Robin Onalini and
Solid
go
alumni.
go on and on and on. Like, really cool program, but they're coming to us. A lot of them are coming to us. Okay, well, Tennille Towns is one who had a Sony deal, but regardless, she had never had a top 40 hit at Canadian radio. Um, but a lot of them are coming to us with a huge plan, like a vision, a plan. We know the steps they're going to take. Sometimes it's like, here's a song, here's who I am, will you play me? That's not really good enough. Like, what have you done locally, regionally, nationally? Who is on your team? Who have you written with? What contacts do you have? What does your social media look like? Who are you as a person? Like, our newest future star is Nate Holler, and they put together a crazy package. Like, I of course I've heard of this kid. He played with the Reclaws and Kira Isabella, but I didn't know he was going to be. I mean, I don't think he knew, but or Don Green and Shannon knew, but until somewhat recently. But they came to us with three solid songs, and they put together this EPK that really showcased his personality. Like, he's a cool dude, a fun guy, and he rides dirt bikes, and just you watch this 3 minute EPK and go, God, I actually kind of know this guy. Like, I feel like this could be my friend. Like, it's just little, like, not those aren't little things. Those are really smart marketing things that they put together in this one big package. And here you go. Like, it was sort of undeniable that this guy is not going to make it. I mean, he's got a great team that helps. But yeah, it was the obvious choice because of everything they have behind it, not just the one good song. It was all of the pieces were there.
I'm glad you said all of that because I think I think it boils down to risk mitigation, right?
Yeah.
You are looking to invest in artists and substantiate that investment by having a bunch of pieces in place first. And if those pieces aren't in place, you've got a lot of trepidation about giving them airtime on your block of 16 stations because you could be giving that to someone else, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you need the social media numbers. You need to have a team around you potentially. I mean, I do think there's situations where artists garner enough attention that they can build a great team,
Yeah. For
right?
sure. Yeah.
But the EPK, like the story, the quality of the music and the production, like
Yeah.
all of those things factor in, and no one of them is necessarily any more important than the other, Like
Yeah.
they can all, the music thing is interesting because that can be quite subjective, right? I
That's
mean, I've
right. Yeah.
had program directors go, "Oh my God, this is the best song ever," and then I've had some go, "Well, we'll never play that." And it's like, well, what if we hit a million streams? And then they're like, well, then we'll play it, and it's
Mm.
like, okay, well, sometimes you have to prove that.
Yeah.
And, but that's incumbent upon the team, right?
Yeah.
But those are all really good things that I think artists need to understand. It's not just, emailing somebody at your level the song and going, hey, listen, can you spin this on the morning show? It's,
Yeah.
hey, this is the plan. This is what we've done so far. This is what we're going to do. This is how
Yeah.
you factor into our plan. And we
Yeah.
need you.
Yeah.
You got
Exactly.
to make a
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. And I want to build the star system in Canada. And I think we've over time have done a really good job of that. And I've heard you several times talk about the number ones that have happened. That's all of us getting onto the same page and going, what are we going to do to move the Canadian star system? And I'm proud. I'm really proud to be part of that. And bringing these brand new artists back up, I also am excited to be part of that too.
Well, it's just good business.
Yeah.
This is the part that used to frustrate me years ago when Canadians weren't getting the love from our own industry. It was like,
Mm.
hey, dummies, you want access to these artists, right? Let's make them bigger together. Because if that artist can roll into your city and play the arena, it changes the business model for everyone, including the radio station. That artist believes that you were imperative in investment on the ground level. They are always going to be accessible for all your bullshit promotions in any interview you ever want, right? Like,
Yeah.
not to say they all are, but some of them
Yeah.
are, right? And let's be honest.
Yeah.
And it's important for people to understand, like, it's we have to bet on each other. The industry's got to bet on the artists, and the
Hmm.
artists have to bet on the industry. We all need to support each other to grow this thing,
Yeah.
right? Collaboratively. So you're obviously practicing what you preach
Hmm.
and investing and helping grow a lot of careers. And thank you for all the work you've done over the years in multiple different facets in this industry. And I look forward to seeing what is next for you in the next few years and the next few decades.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. This was fun.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.